is Thursday, August 10th, and this is a Fox News alert. Brand new threats from North Korea, the rogue regime threatening to strike Guam at any moment.
I want a president that says that if any nation such as North Korea attacks Guam, attacks the West Coast, they will be met with hell and fury.
We are live in Washington, where the Trump administration's refusing to back down.
And a battle brewing between Mitch McConnell and the White House. President Trump's powerful message to the Senate Majority Leader this morning.
And concern that American diplomats are under attack in Cuba. The stunning new reports of bizarre incidents in the communist country and how the U.S. is responding. Fox and Friends First starts right now.
And you are watching Fox and Friends First on this Thursday morning. I'm Todd Pyro in for Rob Schmidt.
Nice to have you here with us again.
Thanks for having me again.
And I'm Heather Childers. Thank you so much for starting your day with us as always. Let's get straight to that Fox News alert though for you. North Korea releasing some chilling details of what it's calling an impending attack on Americans in Guam.
Erratic dictator Kim Jong-un seemingly unfazed by President Trump's threats of fire and fury, calling it, quote, a load of nonsense. Griff Jenkins live for us in Washington, D.C. with the breaking details and the strong words from the Secretary of Defense. Griff?
Todd and Heather, good morning. And there are breaking news here. North Korea, again, escalating war rhetoric. But we're learning more about the plans for North Korea to fire 4 intermediate-range missiles into the waters near Guam. They're going to fire what is a Hwasong-12, 4 Hwasong-12 missiles, and it will be the most provocative missile launch of the Hermit Kingdom to date. It will fly over Japan, Japan vowing to respond. Guam sits some 2,100 miles southeast of Pyongyang, home to 2 U.S. military bases, houses more than 6,000 troops with a population of 160,000, is armed with the THAAD missile defense system. This all coming after the president sent a very clear message.
They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
But the rogue regime persists, calling the president's comments a load of nonsense as the administration speaks with one voice. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis warning Kim Jong-un to urgently heed the advice of the United States and its allies to stop its actions, saying in a statement that DPRK should cease any consideration of actions that would lead to the end of its regime and the destruction of its people. Mattis also reminding the North that the U.S. possesses the most robust military capabilities on Earth, saying the DPRK's regime's actions will continue to be grossly overmatched by ours and would lose any arms race or conflict it initiates. Last night on Hannity, Deputy Assistant Secretary to the President, Sebastian Gorka, reinforcing this one voice from the White House.
That is an evil regime, as bad as anything we know from the Soviet Union. North Korea needs to understand the blackmail stops. And if you get into an arms race, as Secretary Mattis said, with the United States of America, you will lose.
And guys, the timing on this is important. The North Koreans saying they're going to launch it by mid-August, and that is essentially next week. We'll see. Much more to come on this, certainly today.
Yeah, and we're going to talk with a former CIA officer later in the show with his take on how serious this is.
Griff, thank you very much. Meantime,
Thanks.
President Trump facing immediate backlash for threatening to bring fire and fury to North Korea. But former Education Secretary Dr. Bill Bennett says that's exactly why the American people put him into office.
One of the reasons that a lot of us put Donald Trump in office and voted for him is that he doesn't do things in the usual way. And he said, I think in '99 in an interview, would know this better than I, that there's too much kicking the can down the road when it comes to North Korea. He's criticizing Barack Obama for this all along, that this strategic patience didn't work, and so he lays it forward. The problem is we would like to go after them if they merit it, and they do, but they have a hostage. It's called South Korea, 25 million people. So it's very tough to figure out. Mattis's statement, we will destroy your people, is in some ways stronger than Trump's. Your people will go. That'll be the end of them. But how to do this with the hostage being held is another question.
Well, one person who welcomes President Trump's tough talk against North Korea is the governor of Guam, which is now directly in North Korea's sights. Governor Eddie Calvo joining our Brian Kilmeade on Tucker Carlson tonight.
As far as I'm concerned, as an American citizen, I want a president that says that if any nation such as North Korea attacks Guam, attacks Honolulu, attacks the West Coast, that they will be met with hell and fury.
Well, there are about 160,000 American citizens who live on the island of Guam.
2 Cuban officials kicked out of the U.S. after a string of bizarre incidents leave American diplomats with severe hearing loss. Wait to hear this one. The symptoms now linked to a covert sonic device placed inside or near the Americans' residences in Cuba. The State Department remains tight-lipped on exactly what happened.
We take this situation very seriously. One of the things we talk about here often is that the safety and security of American citizens at home and abroad is our top priority.
It's unclear if this was a deliberate attack. The FBI and Cuban officials are investigating. What a weird one there. A terrorist suspect accused of hitting 6 soldiers with his BMW in Paris before speeding away is under arrest this morning. Police shooting the driver 5 times about 150 miles north of Paris after tracking the rented car. The suspect has been hospitalized. Authorities say the attack was without a doubt the work of a terrorist who waited in his car outside the barracks for the soldiers to go on patrol before mowing them down. 3 soldiers seriously hurt this morning.
Meantime, a Russian surveillance plane flies right over the U.S. Capitol, the Pentagon, and President Trump's New Jersey golf club, and it's totally legal. The jet making its flight as part of the Treaty of Open Skies, which allows countries to make unarmed observation flights, that's what they call them, in an effort to promote transparency and to ensure arms agreements are being followed. And the flight path agreed upon by Washington and Moscow. Well, the alleged Russian collusion probe centered around Paul Manafort heating up, apparently. The feds raiding President Trump's former campaign manager's home in Alexandria, Virginia, late last month. Fox News correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera, saying that the surprise early morning search is positive news for our commander-in-chief.
The good news for President Trump is that Manafort is now forced to turn over, or they seized his tax and banking records, which is an indication, Sean, that Manafort is the target, not Russiagate or President Trump.
Well, the raid happening the day after Manafort met with Senate Intelligence Committee members behind closed doors. And, of course, you know, the argument has been that we're concentrating too much on this Russia collusion, Russia investigation, and not enough about the agenda that is on hand.
And one of those key issues on the agenda of course, is health care. Some interesting interplay between the president and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. First, let's hear what Mitch McConnell had to say about, quote, excessive expectations on the part of the commander-in-chief when it comes to health care.
Our new president had, of course, not been in this line of work before, and I think had excessive expectations about how quickly things happen in the democratic process.
So totally different than what he was saying back in January, saying that these things would get done, health care and tax reform, both being things that he said that we would accomplish. So changing his tune just a little bit. And the president agrees with that. Right. This is what the president had to say. He tweeted this. Senator Mitch McConnell said, I had excessive expectations, but I don't think so. After 7 years of hearing repeal and replace, why not done? And
as for those mentions back in January that you were referencing, let's hear what Mitch McConnell had to say about health care right around the start of the new year.
But it's going to be repealed by the end of this week, you think?
The first step will be taken in the Senate by the end of this week, yes, and then it'll go over to the House. What the Speaker has done, which I entirely concur with and the administration's on board with, is to lay out a game plan through the August recess of what we want to try to accomplish. And for myself, I intend to stick to the plan.
It's so incriminating of the GOP there. They haven't figured out why the president won. It was for one simple reason. The American people are sick and tired of the bureaucracy, and yet Mitch McConnell sits there and stands there, if you will, and says bureaucracy is just the way it is. it's not good enough for the American people.
Yeah, a lot of people saying that they are going to pay for it in the midterm elections because, you know, overturning Obamacare, having a new health care plan, that is a huge part of what President Trump ran on and what they voted on him for.
And in fact, Charles Hurt, Washington Times columnist, basically says the same thing. Listen to this.
The troubling thing about it is that I think that it suggests that Republicans in Congress still haven't learned the lesson of Trump's election. The reason that he beat the most entrenched Democratic machine in Democratic politics for the past 25 years, and the reason he beat 16 Republicans in the field, is because he intended to keep the promises that he was making on the campaign trail, and people believed that.
Switching gears now, a Navy pilot hoisted to safety after crashing his fighter jet off the coast of Key West. Dramatic new video showing the Coast Guard lifting the pilot into a helicopter. Check this out. The pilot setting off a smoke signal for help moments after ejecting from his jet in a training exercise. Unclear what led to that crash. Fortunately, that pilot's okay.
Well, the community comes together to mourn a rookie cop, an Army veteran killed in cold blood. Family and friends holding a candlelight vigil for Officer Gary Michael, who's remembered as a hero, rightfully so. Earlier in the day, hundreds of people, including dozens of Missouri police officers, lined the streets to salute Michael. As his procession drove by, Michael was shot and killed during a traffic stop Sunday night. His accused killer is behind bars.
Turning now to extreme weather. Moments ago, Hurricane Franklin downgraded to a tropical storm after churning into Mexico's east coast overnight. The storm, though, bringing heavy wind, pounding rain, and the possibility of flooding and mudslides.
Yeah, Franklin, the first Atlantic hurricane of the season, but now experts are warning that we could see up to 9 of the damaging storms this year. Meteorologist Janice Dean joins us now with the latest and to tell us whether that is true.
Yeah, that is a big headline from yesterday. NOAA upgrading their hurricane count and even saying that we could have 2 to 3 major hurricanes this year as we get into the season. So there's Tropical Storm Franklin, as you mentioned, downgraded, 70-mile-per-hour sustained winds. It was a hurricane overnight and is now starting to weaken as it moves across land. It's losing its warm water source, its energy. So the rainfall is excessive, 8 to 12 inches, higher amounts in the mountains, and this could be, devastating for this area of Mexico. Also want to point out a couple of areas of concern. This one here, 50% chance of formation over the next couple of days. And then we also have an area right here in the Bahamas that we are looking at. So we're getting into peak season, and that means the tropics are heating up. And the National Hurricane Center is now saying 14 to 19 storms. We could see 5 to 9 hurricanes, 2 to 5, which could be major. So, if you live in an area that could be hit by a hurricane, you need to make your preparations now because we are hitting peak season. Back to you.
All right. You have been warned.
Advice. Yes, absolutely.
Thanks, Janice.
You got it.
News alert: North Korea responding to President Trump's tough talk. State media there claiming that it can launch missiles in Guam's direction within days. So what are the president's critical next steps? Here to weigh in, former CIA officer Brian Dean Wright. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
So we keep hearing that the ball is in China's court at this point. What do we need them to do that they have not done previously?
Well, for many, many years, they haven't followed through on their promises for sanctions, right? So North Korea gets about 90% of what it needs from both a monetary perspective as well as the items that they need to build those missiles. All that comes from China. So China needs to enforce what they promised to enforce, which is the sanctions, cut off the money. And second, prevent the North Koreans from going into Beijing, going into China, and buying all that equipment that they need to build this program.
Yeah, both of which they have not done so far. Here's what President Trump had to say about it. Back on July 29th, he tweeted this: "Disappointed in China. I am very disappointed in China. Our foolish past leaders have allowed them to make hundreds of billions of dollars a year in trade. Yet they do nothing for us with North Korea. They just talk. We will no longer allow this to continue. China easily solve this problem."
That's right.
What can we do to force them to follow through this time?
Well, what I think you're seeing the Trump administration do is tie our economic trade to them doing the right thing, right? So you're starting to see some things around aluminum, oddly enough, aluminum foil. I mean, we're looking at bilateral, limitations in terms of trade. When you start hitting the economy of China,
hitting their pocketbook.
That's correct. Then China's going to start to pay attention to say, hey, there is a cost for not doing the right thing. And I think that that's what the Trump administration is doing. doing, and you will see them stepping that up in the number of weeks to come.
But even still, in terms of the latest sanctions that were applied, the United States wanted to go a step further, but China blocked them.
That's right. Fundamentally, China doesn't want to solve this problem. Why? Because they want a buffer state between South Korea and all the G.I. Joes down in Seoul and throughout South Korea and itself, right? Because they fear that if Korea is united, then the United States will be right on their back door. So we have to address that concern if we really want China on board. But the second piece is China has to grow up. They have to understand that they are a member of the international community, and right now they are focused on themselves, their internal stability, over everything else.
They're also concerned, is speaking of internal stability, refugees, and how that would be an issue.
Absolutely. Look, right across the border from North Korea, that area of China is incredibly important to them, really because of the amount of food that's produced in China. It's kind of their breadbasket, right? It's sort of like our Midwest. So to have a bunch of refugees flowing across that border would create a crisis and a problem for them in terms of a food perspective. So they want to make sure that everything stays tight and stable.
And in terms of the trade and the money that does go to North Korea from them, it goes directly to their nuclear arsenal.
Look, North Korea has one priority and one only, and that is to build ballistic missiles and deliver those things to places like the United States. That is what they prioritize over feeding their own people.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see what happens.
Right.
Todd?
All right, Heather, thank you. The time now, 18 minutes after the hour. Were you charged more for generic prescriptions than you needed to be? A brand new lawsuit just filed. And he won't stand for the national anthem, but civil rights groups want you to stand for Colin. Come back 22 minutes after the hour, and a major legal battle is brewing over Seattle's controversial new income tax on the wealthy. The Freedom Foundation now suing the city, claiming that tax is unconstitutional. The new measure unanimously passing last month taxes wealthy Seattle residents on every dollar they make over $250,000 and couples over $500,000. It's all at a rate of 2.25%. City officials say the additional $140 million a year would go toward affordable housing and services for lower paid workers. I don't think we've heard the last of the battle there.
But now to a Fox Business Alert for you. America's largest pharmacy chain facing a lawsuit accused of overcharging customers.
It's not good. Tracy Carrasco from our sister network, Fox Business, here with all the details. Tracy, what's going on here?
Good morning.